Nicholas Hayes had everything a man could buy: private jets, glass towers with his name on them, the kind of success people wrote articles about. But every night, when the city lights blinked outside his penthouse window, there was no one waiting for him at home. His victories echoed in empty rooms. Emma Caldwell, on the other hand, had spent years giving her heart away to people who only stayed long enough to heal from their own pain. She was gentle, patient, the kind of woman who remembered everyone's coffee order but forgot how to rest herself. And after her mother's passing, even her laughter had grown quiet. Neither of them was looking for love. Yet, on a golden afternoon under strings of fairy lights and whispered wedding vows, two lives that had almost stopped believing in second chances crossed paths. Nicholas hadn't planned to attend the wedding. He hated them. The emotions, the forced smiles, the way love seemed to fill the air just to remind him of what he didn't have time for. But Alex Walker, the groom, had been his best friend since college, the rare person who still called him Nick. So he came, out of loyalty, not sentiment. The vineyard was beautiful, tucked deep in Napa Valley, sunlight spilling to the vines like liquid gold. White petals lined the aisle. Chairs stood perfectly in rows, and violins played softly in the background. Nicholas checked his watch. 3:57 p.m. The ceremony would start soon. He told himself he'd stay an hour, clap politely, give his gift, and leave before the champagne ran out. That was before he heard her laugh. It wasn't loud, more like a quiet melody, the kind that slipped between conversations and drifted across the air. It startled him in its softness, that small, unguarded sound. He turned and saw her. She stood near the nurse's table at the back, not among the guests. Her lavender dress was simple, modest, the hem brushing her knees. Her hands were busy adjusting the oxygen tube of an elderly woman, her movement steady and practiced. Her hair was braided loosely, a few strands escaping in the afternoon breeze. He didn't know her name, but something about her made him pause. For once, Nicholas Hayes, the man who lived by numbers and precision, forgot about his schedule. Her name was Emma Caldwell. She wasn't meant to be at that wedding either. Her friend Natalie, a part-time nurse, had been hired to care for the bride's grandmother and begged Emma to come as backup. Emma had resisted at first. After months of hospital shifts, grief, and goodbyes, she wasn't in the mood to dress up and pretend to be part of someone else's happiness. But Natalie had insisted, "Come on, Em. You need air that doesn't smell like antiseptic. You need to see joy again." So she came, quietly, cautiously, never expecting to be noticed. During the ceremony, she stood near the back, holding a small medical bag, her eyes glistening with emotion she hadn't felt in a long time. Nicholas found himself glancing toward her more than he should have. He wasn't sure why. She wasn't flashy or made up like the women who usually filled his evenings. There was something calm about her, real. When she wiped a single tear from her cheek, she caught him looking. For a heartbeat, their eyes met. She gave him the smallest smile, not flirtatious, just honest. It was enough to make something shift inside him. After the vows, guests scattered toward the reception. Laughter filled the air. Champagne glasses clinked and cameras flashed. Nicholas lingered behind. He didn't care for small talk. His thoughts were still at the back of the garden, on her. He spotted her sitting on a wooden bench beneath a tree, writing in a small notebook. Twice he walked past, trying not to look obvious. "You're acting like a schoolboy," he muttered to himself, adjusting his cufflinks. Yet his feet carried him back. "Excuse me," he said finally, his voice lower than usual. "Is this seat taken?" Emma looked up, hazel eyes tired but kind. "No," she said softly. "Go ahead." He sat, just far enough to be polite. For a while, they said nothing. The air between them hummed with the sounds of celebration in the distance. "You don't look like you're here for the wine," Nicholas said at last. Emma smiled faintly. "Is it that obvious?" "Maybe just a little. You're not dressed like the rest of them." She closed her notebook, tucking it into her bag. "I'm not like the rest of them." "I figured," he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. You don't look like someone who enjoys weddings." "Also true," he admitted. "Businessman?" "Guilty," he said. Emma tilted her head. And do businessmen often talk to strangers at weddings? Only when they hear them laugh. Her eyes widened slightly, caught off guard by the sincerity in his tone. A soft laugh escaped her again. It's been a while since I've had a reason to, she whispered. Nicholas looked at her, the corners of his usually composed expression softening. It's been a while since I've heard someone laugh like that. They didn't exchange numbers. They didn't even say goodbye. Nicholas was called away for a work matter, and by the time he returned, she was gone. But when his car pulled away from the vineyard, he stared out at the fading hills and realized he was thinking about her, really thinking, about the nurse with the quiet voice and the soft laugh that somehow felt like home. Nicholas Hayes was not a man easily distracted. He could close a billion-dollar deal and board a flight an hour later, without missing a beat. Yet, that evening, every thought he returned to her. He didn't know her name. She wasn't on the guest list or in the photographs. Even Alex had no idea who she was. Probably one of the nurses for Grandma, he'd said. But Nicholas couldn't let her go. Meanwhile, Emma told herself to forget him. She had met charming men before, men who looked at her like she was rare, until life reminded them she was ordinary. She told herself it was nothing, just a fleeting moment with a stranger. Still, sometimes when the hospital was quiet and the machines beeped softly in the dark, she caught herself thinking of him, wondering if she'd imagined the way he'd listened to her, wondering why she hadn't asked his name. Fate doesn't send emails, but sometimes it sends second chances. It was a rainy Tuesday when Emma stumbled into the hospital cafe, exhausted from a double shift. Her scrubs were damp, her hair tied back hastily, and all she wanted was a cup of coffee and 5 minutes of silence. She stood in line, eyes half closed. "You like almond milk, right?" The voice came from behind her, familiar, warm, impossibly out of place. She turned. Nicholas stood there, umbrella dripping on the floor, jacket off, sleeves rolled to his forearms, holding 2 steaming coffees. He looked like a man who had walked through every storm just to find her. How are you here?" she stammered. "I wasn't sure if you worked here," he admitted with a shy smile. "I took a chance." "You came looking for me?" "I've been thinking about you since the wedding," he said simply. Emma blinked. "You remembered me?" "I never forgot." For a long moment, neither spoke. The noise of the cafe faded around them. Then he held out a cup. "Almond milk, right?" She smiled, a little dazed. "Thank you. May I sit with you?" She nodded. "It's yours." That coffee turned into 20 minutes, then an hour. They talked, not like strangers, but like 2 people who had been waiting to exhale. She told him about her patients, about how some nights she felt she lived more in the hospital than outside it. He told her about his father leaving when he was 11, about how success became his armor. He confessed how he'd built everything he thought would protect him, only to realize it kept everyone out. "I don't really talk about myself," he said. Emma smiled gently, her hands wrapped around the warm cup. "I don't either," she whispered. "But I wanted to." He looked at her then, eyes softer than she'd ever seen them. "I don't know what this is," he said, "but I'd like to see you again." Emma hesitated. "You're a busy man." "I can make time." She looked down, fighting the doubt that whisper men like him always leave. "I've heard that before." Nicholas leaned forward, voice low. "Not from me." After that coffee, something subtle but unshakable began. No declarations, no promises, just a rhythm of 2 people learning to meet in the quiet spaces between their busy worlds. Once a week, they found each other again, sometimes at the same hospital cafe, sometimes walking to the park after his shifts, sometimes sitting in the back corner of a small bookstore. Nicholas showed up, always. Emma didn't ask for more than his presence, and he didn't try to impress her. Slowly, their laughter became familiar, their silences comfortable. He began to smile in ways his board members had never seen before, and she started sleeping through the night again. When he finally invited her to a small gallery event downtown, a corporate function, nothing glamorous, Emma hesitated. "I don't have anything to wear to a gallery," she said quietly. Nicholas smiled. "You don't need anything new. Just be yourself." So she did. In a simple navy dress and her hair in a bun, She walked into the event by his side. The room turned slightly, not because she sparkled, but because she didn't try to. She listened when people spoke, smiled when appropriate, and carried herself with quiet grace. Nicholas stayed near her, protective but proud. "She's different," one of his colleagues murmured. "She's real," Nicholas replied, his gaze never leaving her. Later, in the quiet of the parking garage, Emma leaned against his car. "You sure you're not embarrassed walking in with a nurse?" Nicholas laughed softly, then turned serious. "Emma, I've never been more proud." Her eyes softened, but her voice wavered. "Your world is polished, perfect. I don't belong in it." He stepped closer. "I'm tired of polished. I'm tired of perfect." She looked down. "Some days I cry for my patients. Some days I have nothing left to give. You deserve someone who doesn't bring the weight of death home with them." He reached out, gently lifting her chin. "You carry life, Emma. You give it. Don't ever be ashamed of that." Her throat tightened. No one had ever said words like that to her. He saw her hesitation, the wall built by years of heartbreak and exhaustion. And then he whispered something no one ever had before. "I will never make you feel small for the things that make you strong." After that, love grew, not in fireworks, but in moments that whispered instead of shouted. They walked by the lake on Sunday mornings. They ate takeout on park benches. He started bringing his work to her apartment, not because he needed to, but because being near her made him breathe differently. One rainy afternoon, Emma fell asleep on the couch, her head resting on his lap while he read. He didn't move for hours. He just sat there, fingers brushing through her hair. He'd signed contracts worth millions, but nothing ever felt as valuable as that quiet peace. But no love story arrives without its storm. One evening, Emma opened her door to find Nicholas pacing, his expression tight. "Everything okay?" she asked. He hesitated, then handed her his tablet. A headline glared from the screen. "Nicholas Hayes spotted with mystery woman. Sources say she's a nurse." Emma's stomach dropped. "They found me." He nodded, jaw tense. "Someone must have followed us after the gallery." She sat down, her hands trembling. "I didn't sign up for this, Nick. I can't have cameras outside my hospital. My patients need to trust me." "I know," he said softly, sitting beside her. "I try to keep it quiet." Emma looked at him, pain flickering in her eyes. "I need time to think." He reached for her hand, but she drew it back, not in anger, but fear. "I've spent my life protecting people," she whispered. "I don't know how to protect myself from this." Nicholas nodded, the words catching in his throat. "I'll wait," he said, "however long it takes." For the first time since they met, they said goodnight without a smile. Days became weeks. No calls, no messages, just silence that echoed louder than any argument. Emma threw herself into work, taking every shift she could. She told herself she needed space, that this was safer. But late at night, when the corridors were quiet, she reread his old texts, the one where he'd said, "You're the only calm I've ever known," and her chest ached. Nicholas kept his word. He waited. He moved through meetings, conferences, endless travel, all with the same hollow ache. His world, once built on control, now felt empty without her quiet chaos. Then one morning, a call from Alex, his friend who'd started it all. "You look terrible," Alex said bluntly. "Thanks," Nicholas muttered. "She's still on your mind, isn't she?" Nicholas was silent for a long time. "She told me her patients were her life. I can't be the reason she walks away from that." Alex's voice softened. "You're not, but don't be the reason she stops believing in love." That afternoon, Emma walked into the hospital break room to find a vase of white lilies, the kind her mother used to love. No note, no signature. Just a single almond milk latte beside them. Her breath caught. Natalie grinned from the doorway. Some CEO dropped those off. Said, "He didn't want to bother you. Just wanted you to know he's still waiting." It wasn't grand. It wasn't loud. It was him. Quiet, steady, patient. That night, Emma opened her old notebook and wrote one line. "Maybe love doesn't come with fireworks. Maybe it waits until you're ready to believe again." The next evening, Nicholas's assistant entered his office. "There's someone in the lobby asking for you," she said. "Tell them I'm not available," he replied automatically. "She said to tell you this. You once said you'd wait. I'm done making you wait alone." Nicholas froze. The pen slipped from his hand. He ran to the elevator, heart pounding like it hadn't in years. When the doors opened, she was there, Emma in scrubs, hair tied back, eyes tired but smiling through tears. "Hi," she whispered. He exhaled, almost laughing, almost crying. "I missed you. I missed us," she said softly. They didn't kiss, not yet. They just stood there, hands finding each other like a promise. No grand speech, no applause. Just quiet understanding. They were beginning again, and this time they took it slow. They met once a week again, sometimes at her place, sometimes his. No pretending, no fear of being perfect. They laughed more freely. They cried when they needed to. When Emma lost a patient one night, Nicholas came to hospital, sat with her in the stairwell, and held her hand in silence. No advice, just presence. That moment meant more than 1,000 flowers. Nicholas changed, too. He still ran a company, but he no longer ran from life. He began blocking off afternoons labeled unavailable. When his assistant asked who the client was, he simply smiled. "Someone who reminds me to breathe." One weekend, Emma caught the flu. Nicholas canceled a meeting in Chicago, showed up at her door with soup and fuzzy socks. She protested. He ignored her. He sat by her side, holding her hand through the fever, brushing her hair from her face. When she woke up hours later, he was asleep on the floor, his jacket under his head, hands still holding hers. That was when Emma knew this wasn't just love. This was home. But love always tests what it builds. Months later, Nicholas was offered a position that would make him the youngest global partner in his firm's history. It meant London. It meant distance. "You should take it," Emma said quietly when he told her. "What if I don't want it?" "You've worked your whole life for this," she insisted. "I've worked through life," he said. "You're the first person who's made me want to live it." Her eyes filled. "I can't leave, Nick. My patience, my life is here." "I know," he said gently, "and I'd never ask you to. So, what do we do?" He thought for a long moment. Maybe love isn't always about staying. Maybe it's about growing until the world brings you back. She touched his face. "You think we can?" "I think," he whispered, "real love doesn't end when people follow their purpose. It adapts. It waits." And so they didn't say goodbye. They said, "See you soon." 2 years passed, through missed flights, video calls, and letters tucked into suitcases. Emma stayed in San Francisco, Nicholas in London. They didn't promise forever. They promised effort. They promised honesty. Then, one winter morning, Emma found an envelope under her door. No stamp, just her name. Inside, 3 years ago, I heard your laugh and the world paused. 2 years ago, I found peace in your presence. 1 year ago, I almost let you go. And today, I don't want to wait anymore. If you're free next Saturday, there's a seat for you on Flight 214 to London. Bring your heart. That's all I need. Her hands trembled. She didn't text. She didn't call. She just packed a bag. When she stepped into Heathrow's arrival hall, Nicholas was waiting. Flowers in one hand, hope in the other. They didn't speak. They just fell into each other's arms, a long, quiet embrace that said everything. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he murmured. "I was," she whispered, "since the day you sat beside me on that bench." They didn't rush to marriage or fairy tales. They rented a small flat near the Thames, filled it with potted plants and mismatched mugs. Emma worked part-time at a palliative care home. Nicholas reduced his hours. Some days they fought. Some days they cried. But every day they chose each other again, not because love was perfect, but because love was real. One night, watching the river lights shimmer, Emma said softly, "I used to think love had to arrive loud, like fireworks." Nicholas smiled, threading his fingers through hers. "And now I know," she whispered. "It arrives quietly, on a bench at a wedding, with coffee in a hospital cafe, and in a letter that says, 'Bring your heart.' He kissed her hand. And you did. They had been strangers at a wedding. He with no time for love. She with no faith in it. But love found them anyway, not in grand gestures or dramatic endings, but in the small, steady ways two souls find their way home. And in the end, that was everything.